Hi, I'm Dennis Downs. I'm an artist, and what follows is a slideshow about the building of Studio North, also known as the Barbarian Shelter. This is a aerial photo, obviously, of the island. Not a lot of neighbors, and there's lots of boulders in the water that you have to go around if you want to make it to the island every time. I've been up there 32 trips over the last 11 years. My wife Gail's been up every year for a week, also to help on the different projects. The slideshow that follows will explain a little bit about what it took and the people we met up there. This is the kind of terrain you're talking about. It's almost like the foothills of Colorado when you're driving. It's beautiful along Lake Superior. This is the site on the island that we chose after a couple of seasons of just travel, trying to make trails on the island. It's a cool spot, little peninsula, and the view faces the west. This is just a shot coming home in the motorboat. Up there I have a little 14-foot rowboat with a 9-horse to go back and forth. This is Klaus. He was the guide up there for the Normandy Lodge, and that's my wife Gail. He's spending time teaching us about the different ways to navigate this water system. This is his wife, Wilma. Again, these people lived in the wilderness up there for 26 years year-round. This is Klaus taking the time to take me out, show me fishing spots, talk about the wolves, the moose, the bear, mushrooms. Great guy. Spent a lot of time with me. This gives you an idea of, with a map that Klaus actually made with lines, it shows you the far top right is where I have to start in that little motorboat with everything I'm bringing and negotiate underwater boulders, rocks, sandbars, sandy narrows, marshes, and wild rice beds. Takes, if it's perfectly clear, 35 to 40 minutes for me to get there one way. This is a view of, on the way home in the motorboat, of one of the 35 islands that are on this body of water. This is Klaus and I and Gail going through the rock cut. Again, you have to know where to go, or you might get home, but it's going to take a lot longer. This is Wilma. She wasn't afraid of anything, from cleaning a moose to catching fish to gathering mushrooms. Great gal. This is one of Gail's birthday parties. She comes up every year the week of the 21st of July, and we're kicking back a little bit. This is my laundromat on the island. It gets so hot you sweat, and then you have to change clothes before you go back because the water is still 30 or 45 degrees. This is Gail and I at the southern end of our island, near another place we're trying to make a boat landing. This is, again, Wilma. When you live in the wild for 26 years year-round, you get to know the animals, and she's hand-feeding all kinds of birds. Later, after many tries, I got one little bird to come and land on my hand. That's the view of where I go to work dead ahead through that pass. This is a picture of the four of us on the Michipicoten River. We took them out to this spot. It's just a great place to have a drink. It's a long drive. What we're doing right now is leaving Normandy Lodge, heading out this opening, which I've done for 8 years, anywhere from 3 to 6 trips a year, 200 plus trips the entire length of the lake. In other words, you have to go from here to the most extreme southern end of the lake, where the island is and where I'm building the cabin. This is called rock cut.
I don't know if you can tell or not, but there's actually literally boulders popping up. I've got the motor raised. That milk bottle, which was hung by Klaus years ago, is what you line up with so you miss these giant boulders in the water. When I get to this milk bottle, I line it up with that milk bottle. And if I don't, there would be no prop on this boat, because to either side of me right now are boulders just barely underneath the water, like 4 or 5 inches, some of them a foot. This spring coming through here, you could not tell where the trail even was through here, period. The water was that much higher. And if you try taking a boat motor through that centuries old wild rice beds, it's not, again, going to work out very well for you. So knowing which treetops to line up with certain landmarks really helps out.
This is a picture of the concrete being delivered so that I could take the concrete bags, something I underestimated the amount I would need, from the land, which it's hard to even get the concrete delivered. It's 40 miles to the nearest town in either direction, and the towns are tiny. So you can't take all the concrete out at one time. You got to bring the bags slowly as you're making your daily trips out there, while you're getting the site ready to dig the footings, to mix the concrete, to make the footings on the pylons. This is me clearing the site that we finally decided on, and starting to put in the stakes and give the actual dimensions of the cabin. I brought tools out over the course of previous years and had them stashed out there. That's my concrete mixing machine, the tub. This is me actually in a hole. I made 10 footings, and on top of those there were circular pylons that went up as well. This is actually the forms that I made. I cut rebar that I brought out to the island as well, to try to do it right. You want to keep the cabin above the snow line. I wanted to do this the right way. I just underestimated how difficult it was to bring all this material out alone. This is me just measuring the height of the lines for the site and for the depth of the holes. And this was one of the first ones actually finished, and then a pylon, 8-inch pylon, will go on top of that, and all 10 of those will be level, and that's what the first row of logs will go on, keeping them out of the snow during the winter. What you're looking at here is obviously me bringing supplies out. Every time you go, every season, you've got to bring all the things you need. So every day on the way to work, you're bringing other things out to the island site. After a while, I wised up and made a windshield that keeps the spray off of me a little bit. It's really cold in the morning. You don't want to get there soaking wet and then be in wet clothes for the rest of a 10-hour or 12-hour workday. Some days when you get to the boat, it's full of water. The bow of the boat gets rubbed on the rocks. There is no nice place to park when I get there. This is what I've worked out with Dustin up there. I got his little bilge pump, and I brought a battery that I keep fully charged. And it runs a bilge when this happens, and then we try to fix it. There's always big critters up there that I don't even know what they are. This guy's hitchhiking in the boat. The wasps up there, or the hornets, whatever they are like the size of a baby hummingbird. This is a much more beautiful creature in the front of the boat. It's my wife on one of her trips. Again, everything you bring to the island and use, you have to bring off the island.
This is how much water the little rowboat takes on just in a couple hours. I just bailed this out. So what I did was I hooked up a old bilge pump that Dustin had, and I've got a huge marine battery that I use for emergencies for the trolling motor.
What you're looking at here is a snowstorm. It's something I didn't mention. It's 14 hours of driving one way to get to where I'm at. So you don't miss a day of work. In 32 trips, I have never missed a day of work. Whether it's snow, rain, you got to get there. You got to get something done. This is me at the island. I get out of my Carhartts and you start your day. Some days you have to start later, but you still go. This is how foggy it is when the weather changes. You got to let the sun burn it off. This is when it's starting to clear. I sit in the rowboat. I'm slowly getting out to where I have to go. Again, you can't go fast. You can't outrun the fog or get into the fog. You'll hit rocks. I need landmarks to make this trip every time. This gives you a great example. It's clear on my side, and on the other side of the rock cut that I have to go through dead center and to the left, it's completely fogged in. So you got to go slow, and it just takes maybe an hour and a half or 2 hours to get there. On the way home, this is an osprey nest that I passed. It's really cool. It's huge, and the two osprey are bringing back food to the chicks.
Like I said before, I'm going to have to take it a little slower today because the snow is not really letting up. At least the fog's lifted, which is a big plus. I had to change gloves. Getting them wet and driving in the snow is really bad. Anyway, looks like I'll make it. It's just going to take me a little over an hour. So hopefully I'll be at work soon. Got some trees to take down.
What we're looking at here is actually the pylons now are up. All 10 of them are done. I'll remove the cardboard from them, and we're going to start on row 1. This is actually after the pylons were cured. I coated everything with tar to inhibit moisture ruining the concrete in the future. This is Gail and I turning around the log to get it in position for row 1. And this is actually Gail and I together. We notched the first log together. It took 20 times of cutting. You have to match each end of the log. They're different dimensions, so it was a little tricky. Neither one of us had ever notched a log in our life. Later, again, I'm coating all the openings with a preservative to get rid of fungus in the future. Everyone said the worst part, the most dangerous part of a cabin for rot was where the logs are joined. So we coated everything. Every time I made a cut, I coated a cut. This is actually showing how it's progressing. Pylons are up. This is me dragging a line to the winch to pull up, and now I'm alone, so I'm pulling up the logs any way I can, no matter how it is. Just getting ready for row 2. This is another one of my tools, a PV. It gives me some leverage pushing these things around. So now we get row 2 done, and I think that's as far as I got. And there's 2 pylons in the center. Those will be to support the floor better, and I'll make a beam to go across that.
What I'm doing right now is an additional step required by the code set forth by the Barbarian Shelter Alliance, and it's an anti-fungus, anti-wicking treatment. It's kind of like womanizing the wood. So every open joint on the whole cabin has been treated Just finishing this up. Has been treated, and I'm doing this because of Joe, Harry, and Brian. And everything I did read said that one of the biggest weaknesses with the log cabins was always the saddle joints where they joined. That's where moisture and fungus started. So it's a little extra step. And even after that, then I put caulk in on both ends, roll it, and ooze that out, and then drive down a screw and snug that up.
This is log 1. Everything again is not in perfect order. And another thing I wanted to mention was filming myself. Someone told me to watch Survivor Man years back. He's actually from Ontario. And that's the technique I use. It's difficult to film yourself while you're working and capture what you're doing. This is actually what's involved with taking the logs down is hard enough. Getting a tree to fall right. Then you've got to peel off every branch. Then you got to get it in position off the ground so you can turn it and it starts to dry. It doesn't soak up moisture from the ground when it rains or snows. So here I'm actually getting a log started to be peeled. Again, sometimes it goes smoothly, sometimes it's extremely hard to get the bark off. This is a different site where there's some logs for the roof. You can see the size, and this is my ridge pole. I took care to pick the ridge pole out, so it's perfectly even. It's 10 inches in diameter, and I've made sure she dried very well before I moved it to the site. This is another example of some things I'll do to the cabin later. I'm collecting these unique shapes, peeling them, drying them, coating them. I'll use them for poles for around the deck. Again, this is another part of the island, Hell's Canyon. There were about 8 or 9 logs down in that spot near the water. This is again just another location. You have to get the logs wherever you can. It's not like all the logs you need are in one spot. They're all different dimensions for each row. This again is a finished shot of the ridge pole. This is the log bank. You drag, finally, when you get everything done in one area, you drag it to an area that it can stay off the ground and get ready to be moved off the island. And you have to be really careful to coat all the logs every time you're up there.
This technique has worked to get these 3 up, but I'm not saying it's easy. Pulling the logs down to the water. At least that's what I hope happens. Still got a ways to go. Cool. It's gonna work. I got the log turned around and a hook in the end, and I'm trying to get them down to the lake. keep him on track. I got that other log back there holding him. But he should come. I should be able to get this log off of this. Good. I kind of straightened him out. If everything goes as planned, there should be a giant tree coming down right through there. I hope it's not over 70 feet, because if it is, we might have a camera issue. I put the machete where I hope it lands. Much for that. Cool. Well, I was about 5 feet short, but that was a good one. What you're looking at here is the tip from the end of that 70-foot pine I took down. Hilda Little Fawn Williams has asked me to make a few staffs for her father's eagle staff, the one that's brought out at the Blackhawks games.
What we're looking at here is something I learned from my grandfather and my uncles up on Cedar Island. It's putting boric acid rods into the logs. It helps prevent fungus inside the log later on if moisture hits them. Here you can see that I spaced them out every 1.5 feet for all 3 of the bottom rows. That'll just make the cabin last longer and the logs last longer. This is what happens if you lose a log that you took down in the forest. I had maps for everything, where everything was, and you still lose things. The forest is that dense. You can see the mushrooms on that log. This is to support the floor in the middle. I made a beam by bolting together these pieces of lumber. That'll help support the center of the floor. This shows you the other half of the floor, ready to get the plywood on. Everything's galvanized, hangers, triple coated screws, and then tarred. This is our floor dance. Again, Gail was up for this event, so I timed it so the floor, we would put the last floor pieces together. When I left, I realized I couldn't have the floor intact over the winter, so I made it so that there's a 1-foot opening I can remove with screws and a screw gun, and then I tar all that so it can drain in the wintertime. This is me losing my mind, thinking over what I've got to do for row 5. This is the starter row 5, and this is a log bank for the next set. You can see the color codes on the ends of the logs. That tells me which logs are in which row. Again, you can't depend on electricity in this part of Canada. It just is shut off for random reasons. So I have 2 manual alarm clocks to wake me up every morning.
Okay, it is hitting the top.
Hold it.
Yep. Whoa. My board's not put in very well.
Hang on.
So it did kind of hit the top on this one.
It head-butted it.
Yeah, a bit, but not real.
Alright, go back and get the tail end of it.
Got it?
Yeah. I don't know if you can see this or not. This is where the floor meets the wall. So I open up the floor in the winter, let it breathe. But what I've also done now is I've coated those joiners, hangers with tar as well. They say the north wall is the worst, so the whole log on the back wall and all the material after I womanized it 2 years ago, now I've coated it with black tar because it's had enough time to dry. Again, the Barbarian building code. I don't think these fittings are going to rust soon. We're cutting the last notches for the supports on top of the 12th row. Josh came up to help me with the poles for the roof.
This is a shot of Twin Rocks. It's on the opposite side of the island. When cutting the trail to get to the logs with, by the way, this is my Echo. I've used it to do all the trails and taken down every tree on the island. You have to move around every time, so it's a shorter walk to get to opening up these trails. These are boxes I've gotten to protect the material I leave out on the island during the winter and from the animals. The bears somehow even wanted to eat the gas and oil when I even put it up in trees. These are close-ups that they destroyed stuff that I left. So I built some bear cages early on. They weren't strong enough and they just ripped them to shreds. These are the little bears, and they turn into bigger bears. This is Eddie. He was a problem case, the first bear we saw the first day I brought Gail out to the island. That's why we nicknamed it Standing Bear Island. This is the size of the bears. Within a mile, this bear was taken of the island, 700 pounder. This is a picture of one day taking Gail for a walk to the high point on the island. When we turned around 5 minutes later, the bear had ripped this log, this sprouted tree to shreds to let us know he was there. These are moose visiting the bear cages early on in the first couple years. Then I realized I had to build a bigger, stronger bear cage for the tools. So this is what I started doing with baling wire and fresh birch log limbs. So far it's worked pretty good, and I beef it up every year. This is the end product, and it hasn't been invaded by animals yet.
about 15 minutes later. That's where I'm heading. This is the west side view of the island. These are our little friends that are following me. Provided nothing goofy happens, this should go well. I just got to get around that furthest point up there and into the bay, and then figure out how to get them untied and out of the water, and then up onto the land so I can use them for row 9. Signing off. This is the east side of the island. What you're looking at is my tool stash, bear-proof barricade. I used this for the first 2 years while I cut all the trails on the east side of the island.
Okay, what we're looking at here is starting row 4, dragging the logs up, getting them in position. We're moving right along, starting to take shape. This is another shot. I think that's row 5. And these are the log hooks. Some of the different tools I use to help me pull things and grab things. Here we're at row 6 is complete, and I'm dragging up 2 more. I started using ladders. It's hard to get in and out of the cabin at this height. This is me actually turning around a log, I believe, for row 8. So we're moving along. It's starting to take shape.
Didn't crash into the floor. I'll have to look at that ladder later. Okay. I'm gonna need a bigger boat. I'm back. It's end of August, and I just got one of the first ones I dragged around the lake up on to start row 9.
What we're looking at here is getting logs in position to actually drag them around the island to the site. This is jockeying them into position. Now we've got all 4, and I'll push the rowboat out, jump in, get the ropes in order, and start hauling them. This is a bad example. Don't ever do this. I got mad and I actually pulled a log up and spun it around in the boat. Don't do that. This is the logs actually being pulled around to the opposite side of the island, to the site. Worked out well. This emphasizes the rocks and the danger in this section of these lakes. If you don't know these lakes, it's going to end really poorly for you. You can't just fly around in a boat and not know where these submerged rocks are. This is in the mouth of the rock cut. If there's even a little wavy action, you'd never see the boulders till you hit them. These are huge rock piles all over the lake system, just under the surface of the.
Okay, it got a little more complicated than I thought. I don't recommend this technique to the first timer. I don't recommend this technique to anyone. But I've got the 3 logs in, now I just got to get the biggest log in the middle.
Okay, what we're looking at here is the other log bank closer to the site, but it's in a really rocky area with a lot of deadfalls under the water, so I can't use the motorboat. So I made a log bike strapped with moving straps and a seat, and I can paddle 3 to 5 logs at a time. It really works well. Once you get them moving, it's going. These are just examples of different times I use this technique. Here you can see I'm sitting on 3 logs total, and I'm pulling 2 across to the site. These are shots with the motion detector cameras that I've got all over the island. I got 5 of them. Captured some good things with these Moultries. I've used them for 11 years now. These are the twins. It's pretty cool. This is that Hell's Canyon area.
I think you can see the black flies on the screen. Storm's coming in. But what I'm doing now is I got one up this morning, one yesterday, one this morning, and this was the 3rd out of the 4 big ones. And I've got to turn it around. So it's, the butt of the log is there and the tip is there. So it's one of those things you got to do real slow. You pull some, you push some, you roll some, you turn some, you push some, you roll some. But it's not that easy to get these things to move. Can't do too much because you can't have one end go off, then the game is over. There. Okay. Then I'll go push that side and then I'll roll it. And little by little it'll come around and be done.
Okay, we've got a lot of logs ready. They're all coded and marked for which rows they're going to be. I think these are for rows 8 through 11. And this is me on top of row 10. This again, drying some clothes for the way home. You do this almost every other day. These logs are actually now at the site. This is the path that's worn to the site from when I get the logs to the site. This is dragging them up. I think this is row 10 or 11, getting them over and up. And every year when I leave, every single year, every log gets a coat of sealer. This is me sealing the other side of the cabin. This is the hobbit hole. I finally cut into the log cabin so I don't have to climb over the walls every time with a ladder. because it's getting high.
What I decided was it'd be better if I made the hobbit hole so I could actually go through, and I'll just board it up when I'm coming in and out. But that's going to make life a lot easier. Bears are, I'll just board it up when I'm gone, put a piece of plywood over it, screw it down. Chinking experiment at the Barbarian Shelter. You can see the aluminum goes through the length of it inside. That was on for a year. I needed a large pry bar to get that off, so I'm happy about that. Yeah, it's apparently holding pretty well.
What you're looking at here is the following year. I started by improving the size of the hobbit hole. I went up 5 logs. I could get in and out a lot easier. This is the part that's difficult for people with cabins, the chinking. I had a lot of years to think about it, so what I came up with was aluminum lath work for the big gaps, combined with the great stuff, and then smoothed out and then coated with concrete. Even if it's crappy out, you got to go to a different type of job. This is me with a machete cutting off the extra foam. There's always something to do. This is the north wall. You can see the amount of foam, and then this coming year I'll cut all that off. That's the last wall to finish. Again, these are cool critters on the island. These are actual photos taken of a lynx. I've seen 9 different lynx up there. Just really cool. Again, this is the coating of the ends of the logs so they don't suck moisture in during the rainy and cold winters.
To give you an idea of how tough this stuff will ultimately be, that's a razor sharp machete. I sharpen it 2-3 times an hour when I'm doing this, and to get it away from the wood with nothing on top of it is hard. So you can imagine what it's like between the logs with a 500-pound log every time sitting on top, or whatever it is, 300, 400, 500 pounds sitting on top. Good example of what I did with the chinking for any bigger gaps. It's aluminum mesh between the gaps, and then that bolt you see, there's a bolt every 6 foot from every corner that I drive down. It's a 3/8 inch rod to hold the logs in place when you make openings, and in general for stability and strength. So that's just another part of my building code for the Barbarian Shelter. And as you can see, when I'm done with this, that will be probably between 2.5 and 3 inches of single cell foam with a supporting structure in the middle. So good luck with the varmints getting through. And then this will actually expand. I got to get off the ladder now. This is the last wall that we're going to, we just finished the 3rd step of chinking. So again, it's aluminum lath inside. Then it's saturated with the great stuff once. That makes a big beam, a big bead, it goes out, but then you go back after that dries and you put a bead on the top and a bead on the bottom. Let that dry. Next time we'll cut it with the machetes and then grind it and then use a cement paint like you would use on your foundation. So you got foam covered with cement, paint. So that you get rid of the bugs and really insulate the Jesus out of it. So we're doing the fun part of chinking because chinking sucks. Most people hate chinking more than they hate building the log cabins. But we've got the wall done. I'm going to remove the tape while the mortar is still wet, and that way we should get a nice line. Hope if I'm right. It's like a big art project. So. All right. So far, so good. It's coming off because it isn't. The concrete has not dried yet, so that's cool. It's a nice line. So far, so good. That's definitely good. All right, it worked.
Okay, what we're looking at here is actually the cement that's specially made to adhere to foam, and I used frog tape to put down on every run so that when I'm done with the concrete work, I peel that back and you got a nice line and you don't have to clean the concrete off of the logs. This is what it looks like in the beginning, and this is what it looks like in the end. And then again, I'll seal that. Every time we seal everything that we do. And this is like the end of the season. Every season you get a coat of stain or sealer. And this is when the gables are up and the chinking in the front is done.
It's the 20th of August. It's my last trip for the year. They're giving me chemotherapy, and this is my chemotherapy for me. I'm on the east side of the island. These are going to be used for the roof to hold it up. I need 4 more. That's what I'm going to try and peel today. I've already dropped them. I got to carve out a area in the forest so I can get at them and peel them. It's the wrong time of the year to peel them. They don't want to be peeled. It's more like chipping the bark off. So it's probably going to take the better part of a day. And to give you an idea where we're at, it's half a mile to the cabin site, quarter mile to the boat.
Okay, these are the pieces that I used for the gable. They had to be flattened on both sides. You get a better idea of how they look here. They're all supported. There's rods going through them to keep them in place. These are actually extra purloins for the roof. These were better choices, better shapes. They still have to be hauled around the island. This is some of them when they were done. The wolves up there are everywhere. Literally, you see them. This is the ridgepole in shape, and I had a lot of time to think about how I would do this. And I did it old school Egyptian style by putting ropes over a fake ridgepole, jumping off of a ladder, pulling them up 1 notch until I got to the top, and then used a ladder to get up there and actually hump it onto the last little log.
It's my last day in September. I believe it's September 14th. I'm balancing on the top of the logs, and this is the surrounding view from the cabin. That's the top of the cabin. Try and get my balance here. And this is how far we are. These are the walls going up that way. Ridgepole. All the inside walls are done. And this is your view.
This is a better shot. Shows that the gables are up, the ridge pole's in position. The other tiny poles are just to hold the roof end to end during the winter while I'm gone. The one going right to left, there's 2 supports that I added. That'll help me later on keep the roof support it as well. This is my little shelter that I've used to protect the tools that are directly in front of the cabin, and I sit under there during horrendous thunderstorms and snowstorms. This is what I came back to. Every time, you never know what's going to happen. 3 trees went down in a tiny tornado that flew through and totally destroyed my shelter. Sent a log across the cabin, a full-size 70-foot tree. I had to cut that out. And I started thinking, well, what do my trails look like? And I stopped counting at 28 major trees directly across my trail. That took a couple of days. Gail has helped me on the trails. This is a shot on one of her visits. Trip 25, last one of the season. Everything's buttoned up, wrapped up, taped up, coated. Got 3 coats on each gable. What you're seeing here are supports for the winter. The supports, I don't know if you can see that one, for the ridgepole, which is up. So everything's coated, everything's stuccoed, sealed 3 times. I'm going to tar the perimeter that's open so it can drain during the winter. These are all coated and braced up, so it should last the winter, and then I can put the roof on next spring. 216 kind of threw me a curveball, but I think I've dealt with it pretty good. Got a lot of chinking done. Gail made 1 trip up earlier too. Got the ends of the logs capped, got the corners cemented and chinked. Inside, all the walls are done, and now I've got a workbench that I made out of the fallen jack pine that I had kept. Never knew what I was going to do with it, but I do now. That'll come in real handy in the spring. All right, that's it for 2016, and I'll be back in the spring.